An innocent question from an 8-year-old girl silenced an entire town hall, leaving even Donald Trump vulnerable and sharing a deeply personal story about faith, loss, and redemption. What unfolded next moved everyone to the brink of tears. The church fellowship hall in Shreveport, Louisiana, hummed with the subtle buzz of folding chairs scraping against the floor and quiet conversations filling the air. The room, typically reserved for Sunday gatherings and Bible studies, had taken on a different purpose that evening. Standing at the front of the hall was Donald Trump, a figure instantly recognizable to all present. His towering presence, orange-tinted complexion, and iconic hand gestures were as familiar as his name. But tonight, something about him was different. His tone was softer, his demeanor more reflective, as though he felt the weight of the moment. The crowd, a mix of families, retirees, and local townsfolk, sat with cautious curiosity. They were eager to hear what he had to say, but couldn't anticipate the emotional turn the evening would take. Among them sat Lily, a small 8-year-old girl clutching a worn leather Bible to her chest. She wore her best Sunday dress, and though she looked every bit the picture of innocence, her eyes held a quiet intensity that set her apart. Before they arrived, her mother had leaned down to whisper, "Ask your question if you're brave enough, but only if it comes from your heart." Lily had nodded, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. She had rehearsed the question over and over, scribbling it in her notebook at recess and whispering it under her breath at night. It wasn't a childish question. It was something much deeper, something that had been weighing on her soul. As Trump began speaking, his usual topics filled the air: policies, achievements, and visions for America's future. The audience clapped politely, nodding occasionally, but the atmosphere lacked the electric energy of his rallies. Lily waited, gripping her Bible tighter with each passing moment, her palms damp with nerves. Finally, the floor opened for questions. Adults rushed to line up, their voices loud with concerns about local issues and compliments for Trump's trademark red tie. Lily hesitated. Her tiny frame seemed to sink further into her seat as fear bubbled up inside her. But when her mother gave her a gentle nudge, she stood. Her legs felt like jelly, but she pressed forward, each step a battle against her own trembling nerves. Whispers rippled through the room as people noticed the small girl with the oversized Bible clutched tightly to her chest. The line inched forward, and when her turn finally came, Trump's eyes softened at the sight of her. His towering frame seemed to shrink slightly as he leaned down and asked gently, "What's your question, young lady?" Lily's voice trembled as she spoke, but her words were clear and unwavering. "Mr. Trump, what does God mean to you?" The room froze. Conversations halted. Every eye darted to Trump, waiting for his response. For a man known for his quick wit and unshakable confidence, Trump didn't have an immediate answer. Instead, he stared at the little girl, the Bible she held, and something in his expression shifted. It was as if her question had struck a chord deep within him. Finally, he straightened, his voice unusually calm. "That's a big question," he said, pausing to choose his words carefully. "And it's not one I've always had an answer to." The crowd shifted uneasily. Trump admitting uncertainty? This wasn't the polished politician they were used to. His usual bravado seemed to fade as he continued, his tone almost fatherly. "When I was about your age, I had a lot of questions about God too. My parents took me to church every Sunday. I'd sit in those pews, staring at the stained glass windows, wondering if God even noticed me." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd before settling back on Lily. "My father used to tell me that faith is like climbing a ladder. You don't always see where it leads, and sometimes it feels like it's going to break under you. But you keep climbing because you trust there's something up there worth reaching for." The audience hung on his every word, their usual skepticism replaced by rapt attention. Trump wasn't delivering a speech. He was sharing something raw, something human. "But I didn't always understand that," he admitted, glancing down at the podium. "There were times when I felt abandoned, when I thought maybe God had given up on me. Those moments made me angry, made me doubt." He stopped again, the weight of his words filling the room like a heavy fog. Lily's wide eyes shone with unshed tears, her grip on the Bible loosening slightly. Trump noticed, his voice softening even further. "But I've learned something, Lily. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting there's a purpose, even when you don't see the whole picture. To me, God is that purpose. He's the one who keeps reminding us to keep climbing, even when we're scared or tired." The crowd was utterly silent, the air thick with emotion. Lily's tears spilled over as Trump's words settled in her heart. She looked down at the Bible in her hands, her late grandmother's gift, and clutched it tightly once more. "My grandma used to say that too," she whispered, her voice barely audible but powerful enough to reach every corner of the hall. "She said God is always listening, even when we can't hear him." Trump's expression softened into something almost paternal as he replied, "Your grandmother was a wise woman, Lily, and tonight you reminded us all of something important. Sometimes, the simplest questions are the hardest to answer, and sometimes they're the ones we need to hear the most." The audience erupted in quiet applause, many dabbing at their eyes as they reflected on the unexpected depth of the moment. What had started as a routine town hall had transformed into something far more profound, a shared moment of vulnerability and truth. And all because of one little girl's courage to ask, "I stand for what I believe in, and for who I am when no one else is looking," Trump said, pausing as his gaze fell back on Lily. "Thank you for reminding me of that, Lily. You're wiser than most adults I know." The crowd erupted into soft applause, but Lily didn't seem to notice. Her tears had stopped, replaced by a quiet pride. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her dress and looked up at her mother, who smiled at her with glistening eyes. As the applause subsided, Trump's tone shifted, signaling the weight of the story he was about to share. The room grew silent, the anticipation thick as Trump leaned slightly over the podium, his eyes scanning the crowd before resting back on Lily. "There was a time," he began, his voice soft yet deliberate, "when I thought I had it all figured out. I had ambition, plans, and drive. But one moment in my life made me realize how little control we truly have." The crowd leaned forward, captivated. Trump rarely revealed glimpses into his personal life, and now he seemed ready to lay bare a part of his soul. "My brother, Fred," he said, his voice quieter now, "was the kindest and most genuine person I've ever known. He had a light, a goodness about him that I didn't fully understand then. But Fred struggled. He faced his demons, and no matter how much we tried to help, it wasn't enough." Trump's voice faltered momentarily. He cleared his throat, gripping the edge of the podium for support. "When he passed away, I was angry. Angry at him, angry at myself, and angry at God. I couldn't understand why someone so good, someone with so much potential, had to leave this world so soon." The room was still, the weight of his words pressing on the audience. "For a long time," Trump continued, "I turned away from faith. I questioned everything. If God was real, why would he let that happen? Why would he take Fred and leave me?" He exhaled deeply before continuing. "But then, something happened. One night I saw Fred's face in my mind, his big, goofy smile, and I heard his voice clear as day saying, 'Don't be angry, Don. You've got work to do.' That moment changed everything for me." The silence in the room was profound, the crowd hanging on his every word. "Faith isn't about understanding everything," Trump said, his voice steadying. "It's about trusting there's a reason, even when you can't see it. Maybe Fred's purpose was to teach me that." He turned back to Lily, his expression soft. "So when you ask me what God means to me, I'll say this. He's the reason I keep going when it's hard. He's the reminder that we're here for more than ourselves. And he's the one who gives us hope, even in the darkest times." Lily's tears shimmered again, but they didn't fall. She stood taller, clutching her grandmother's Bible like it was the most precious thing in the world. Then, from the back of the hall, a man rose, his rugged face lined with years of hard work. His voice cut through the stillness. "Mr. Trump," he said, "I've spent years wrestling with my faith. Hearing you talk about anger and doubt, it makes me wonder if we're all just afraid to admit we're struggling. Do you think that's part of the problem?" Trump nodded, his gaze meeting the man's. "I think you're right," he replied. "Faith isn't easy. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes it feels like shouting into the void. But that's what makes it powerful. It's not about being perfect. It's about trying, even when we don't have all the answers." The man nodded thoughtfully as he sat back down, and murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lily's small voice broke the momentary silence. "My grandma used to say faith is like planting seeds," she said. "You don't always see them grow right away, but you have to believe they will." Trump smiled, a genuine expression that seemed to soften his usual demeanor. "Your grandma sounds like a wise woman," he said. "And she's right. Faith is a seed. It doesn't always grow the way you expect, but that doesn't mean it's not there, growing in ways you can't see." The room seemed to shift, the atmosphere charged with a shared vulnerability. What began as a town hall had become a heartfelt conversation about doubt, faith, and resilience. An older woman raised her hand next. "I lost my husband last year," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been angry at God ever since. Is it too late to find faith again?" Trump stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his voice soft but resolute. "It's never too late," he said. "Faith isn't something you lose forever. It waits for you. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, when you least expect it, it comes back." The woman nodded, tears shining in her eyes, as the room collectively exhaled. Trump straightened, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "There's something I've learned," he said. "Faith doesn't always show up in grand moments. It's in the small ones, a helping hand, a listening ear, or a brave question like Lily's. Those moments remind us of what matters." The audience was silent, absorbing his words. "Faith," Trump continued, "has the power to bring us together. It's not about being the same. It's about understanding we're all climbing the same ladder, one step at a time." A ripple of applause started, building to a standing ovation. But as the applause subsided, Trump leaned in for one final thought. "Ask yourselves what faith means to you," he said. "Don't be afraid of the answer, no matter how uncertain it might be. Faith isn't about knowing, it's about believing. And if something tonight touched you, hold on to it. Let it grow. Share it with the people who need it most." The room erupted once more, strangers now exchanging smiles and stories, their hearts lighter. Trump walked over to Lily, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "Thank you, Lily," he said. "You've got more courage than most people twice your age. Don't ever lose that." "Thank you, Mr. Trump," she replied, her voice steady. As the hall slowly emptied, the message was clear. Sometimes, the bravest questions lead to the most profound answers. And in those answers, we find the pieces of ourselves we didn't know were missing. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on your own faith. Share it with someone who might need it today, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and bring us closer together.